Hey guys, welcome back to Critical Flick. Today I'm reviewing Rebel Moon, now streaming on Netflix. So the full title of this moon is Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, and is the newest film from Zack Snyder. And I have to say, as a fan of Zack Snyder's work and also a fan of big space fantasies, I was excited to check this one out. This one you get kind of the classic sci-fi tropes of a group of rebels trying to take on a giant galactic empire. You've seen this plenty of times before, specifically in Star Wars, and there's a lot of homages to other sci-fi franchises in the film, and I personally enjoyed that. While some people say it's very derivative and kind of generic, and that's true for the most part in this film, but I do like that it takes some of the elements that we have enjoyed in other franchises and kind of injects it into this new story. And in this story, we follow Korra, who's a woman who's deciding to take on the Empire after they come into her village, take all their resources, and she's trying to fight back against them. A large bulk of this film is her going around to other planets and trying to recruit other people to join her cause and take on this big, powerful force. I would say my favorite thing about this movie is actually the world building itself. You can tell that they're trying to create this huge, expansive world with lots of lore and mythos that you can really dive into, and I enjoyed those elements immensely. There'd be the different planets we're going to, the different creatures, or all the different races or costuming. You feel like it's a really well fleshed out world, and while I will say there is a little bit too much exposition, this movie, because it is a part one of obviously a larger franchise that they're working on here, there's a ton of just telling you what's happening, telling you the backstory. And while it's really interesting, I do think it bogs down the film, particularly in the first two acts. We really are just a lot of exposition talking about the background history of our characters and what's happening and kind of the global and, intergalactic politics. And while I do enjoy those elements, and I think they'll pay off later on, it does make the movie feel quite slow at times, in my opinion. And I think that's the consequence of being a part one. And I have heard, from rumors around that there's a director's cut of this film. It seems to always happen with Zack Snyder. I don't know why there isn't just a full release of these films. And I would love to see if there's more elements being added into the story. Maybe we could understand a little bit more other than this kind of exposition dumps that we get over and over and over again. I think probably a 3-hour cut of this movie might be a little more interesting and maybe actually cut up the monotony of it. It's weird to think that a longer film might be less boring, but we've seen that in the past, and I could see that happening with this one, so I'll be interested to see what they decide to do, whether they do something with part one or if part two maybe is more expansive and it really cuts down on that exposition that kind of bogs down this one. I think the visual effects of this movie actually are very good in my opinion. I like I said, the creatures, the worlds that they're building. They don't look cheesy. Obviously, there's a ton of CGI in this film, but I never thought it looks aggressively bad. I think it actually helps that Snyder uses kind of that, in many ways, kind of drab and desaturated tone to his films, because when a film is darker and less vibrant, it's kind of less likely that you're going to see that CGI and see how much it pops off the screen. So I do like that it looks good. I think when it comes to the CGI elements, it looks good. If you're not a fan of Snyder and kind of his orangey, gray, black tones, you might not love this film, but I personally enjoy it, so I think that's kind of up to personal taste. But I think the practical sets they used and the actual set pieces looked very good as well, not just the CGI elements. There's something about Zack Snyder where he's able to take kind of these individual scenes and make them look really interesting and make it look really compelling, but when you stitch them all together, sometimes it feels a little muddled and you're missing the pieces until you get this, like I said, expansive cut of the film. And this movie kind of falls in that category again. There's some really good individual scenes, but pieced together, the movie just doesn't feel like it moves at the pace that it's really supposed to. It really feels like it's maybe a couple episodes of a show that kind of just ends, and that pacing doesn't really make it conducive to a film. So I don't know. It's kind of a mixed bag when it comes to that. As far as the action scenes, I think they actually look really good, and there's a lot of weight to it. There's a lot of energy going back and forth using whether it be, laser swords or guns or knives. So there's a lot of interesting scenes involving that. Obviously, I have to say, it's Zack Snyder, so there's a lot of slow-mo. If you're not a fan of slow-mo, you might not love these action scenes, but I personally like it. I feel like not a lot of people use slow-mo anymore. Maybe it is an older technique that people don't like as much, but I personally think it's okay in this context, and I don't think it really makes the scenes any worse than they would be otherwise. The one thing I will say is this movie not being rated R and kind of feeling like it's pulling back from being a little more graphic than it could be. Some of the scenes, particularly the first fight scene that involves Korra, maybe I would have liked to see more, gory elements or make it seem a little more heavy. But that's just a consequence of the rating system. Maybe an uncut version of this movie would look a little bit better when it comes to those action scenes, especially when you use knives. I think it makes it look better when you actually go full bore and don't pull back for just audiences. My big negative to this movie is actually just the overall story and our characters. While I do think that Korra is an interesting character and adds some depth, the rest of the characters feel like they're kind of just throwaway, stereotypical people that are just there for the ride. Nothing about them feels really in-depth or interesting. Maybe, like I said, there's some stuff on the cutting room floor. There's characters like Titus that they really build up, and you say that he's this incredible general and this like larger than life figure, and he really doesn't do anything for most of the film. He's not in it the full film, and that's another problem, is it probably takes about a good hour and a half to get all the characters fully involved, so they really aren't together till the end of the movie. But I don't feel like any of them had an opportunity to really show who they are outside of a quick introduction scene of like, okay, these are these like badass individuals. But I would love to see more from them. Maybe in part 2, obviously we're going to get more depth into who they are, maybe their individual stories. But this movie really lacked that for me. Some of our main characters, like I said, Cora, you get a little bit from them, but the rest of them, they're almost just there. They really are just background dressing, and they don't really do anything. Another kind of negative for me is the villain of the story. He's like your stereotypical space Nazi. He's just a super bad, evil guy. Maybe we'll see more from him. The end of the movie kind of hints at something going on with him, but I don't know, throughout the film, he just pops up, super evil, says bad things, you hate him. There's nothing real depth to that. You kind of had this mother world that's out there. It's basically an empire that's taking all the resources from this agrarian culture and stomping out the uprising. We've seen this before. It's Star Wars. So I don't think that it did anything to separate itself from other films. I think it's a tried and true formula that some people will enjoy. I myself would have liked to see just a little bit more from that. And I think there's some elements that I really enjoy about it, and I can't wait to see what they do with part 2. And that's a good testament to the film. I didn't think like, oh god, enough of this, I don't want to see anymore. But it made me intrigued. Like I said, that world building is the thing that kept me hooked, and I really hope they continue on that and expand on kind of the foundation that they set. So if you check out Rebel Moon on Netflix, let me know what you thought about it. Did you enjoy it as much as me? Did you enjoy it more? Did you enjoy it less? I'd love to hear people's opinions. I know that Snyder films can be polarizing, so, make sure you tell me how you feel, what you want to see, if you loved it, if you hated it. I always love to hear people's opinions, because this movie is probably going to have some discourse around it, and I always enjoy that back and forth. So again, thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and see you guys next time.